Now, I sincerely apologise on behalf of the internet and all the technology that's ever been invented. That was an absolute first for us. That is just part and parcel of trying to achieve what we are here on Sara's Country. If you've just rejoined us, thank you so much for your patience. We are back up and running. Now, as I said, at the start of May, Forestry Minister Shane Jones vowed to introduce greater regulation on log processing here at home to ensure the domestic market had sufficient log supply, rather than logs being sent to more lucrative markets. And a great story recently by Richard Rennie on farmersweekly.co.nz, Jones said the COVID-19 crisis showed how an over-reliance on log exports to a few markets makes the industry heavily reliant on them for its success. Now, joining us now to discuss the situation is Marty Verry from Red Stag. Marty, firstly, welcome to Sara's Country again. Thank you for your patience.
No trouble.
Now, how does the government support more economically viable domestic processing?
Yeah. Let me echo the minister's points there about over-reliance on China. We export about 60% of our logs, and 80% of those go to China. And China has its own plans to be self-sufficient. A few years ago, it locked up its own forests, with targeting being self-sufficient in the 2030s. And that's going to kind of coincide with the likely decline in the urbanization process in China, which means, we're planting all these trees in New Zealand. We've developed this billion tree policy, and we're all assuming that the logs are going to go to China, but China's got its own self-sufficiency plans, and the whole rest of the world has got billion tree policies. Australia's got it. There's a trillion tree United Nations policy that the United States has signed up to. So relying on China for these logs is risky, very risky. And our country's whole carbon offset structure plan is based on being able to meet our climate change emissions by sequestering carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through forests. And so, the lack of a customer base, of a major customer, losing a major customer is a big problem. So that brings us on to kind of what we do about it, and that's where we and the minister want to see a massive increase in the utilisation of timber in New Zealand. We want it to be the dominant building material. It's already dominant in smaller houses, but we want it dominant in the larger buildings in New Zealand. And if it can get to about 2/3 of buildings in New Zealand, it means that New Zealand's building structures can be carbon neutral.
Marty, you've been in the game for a while. When was the turning point in our construction that we moved away from wooden houses?
Oh, no. The wooden houses are very, very dominant. They're still up at over 90% of the market share for houses up to 2 or 3 stories. It's more the commercial buildings and the mid-rise and the high-rise things. I mean, there's wooden buildings going up to 20, 25 stories now, with plans afoot to go up to 100 stories in Tokyo. So, and around the world, actually, they're really pushing the limits with new products that are available, like cross-laminated timber, LVL, glulam. These mass products are very, very strong and light, and they lend themselves to very high vertical construction. So that's the market share we're after, and that's where, in 10 years' time, we want that to be the norm, wood to be the norm. We want people to walk past a building and look at it, and if it's concrete and steel, we want to say, why are these people polluting the environment like that? Because that's where it's heading in terms of the urgency to address climate change. And and building materials account for about 10% of New Zealand's climate change emissions profile.
So I understand you're the largest sawmill in the Southern Hemisphere. Marty, there was a lot of government proposals or presentations by smaller operators worried that they wouldn't have the ability to have economies of scale because of their own lack of investment into technology such as you have made. How do you think the playing field's going to look in another 10, 20 years?
Well, there's a continuous rationalisation of the sector around larger, more automated sawmills. And with this downturn we're coming into now, we're going to see, I think, quite an acceleration of that consolidation process. It's been going on all around the world and New Zealand for decades and decades. There used to be hundreds of sawmills in New Zealand, and that trend will continue. You've either got to really get niche or get very, very, very efficient to be able to compete. And So I think it's just a natural thing that some won't be competing. The log suppliers are making choices about who they back, and who's a stable counterparty to get in behind. And when they see someone becoming resilient and strong, having reinvested and being the lowest cost producer, then they can supply them. So I guess this bill that's come in or been proposed doesn't really affect us so much. We have very, very good log supply relationships and long-term agreements with big institutional foresters that support the efficient scale operators domestically. And I think, like I said, in the 2030s, they're all going to be looking for domestic customers because the offshore markets could dry up.
Certainly. Now, the carbon zero construction policy, a national procurement strategy that you're in support of, could you tell us a bit more about the flow-on effect of that policy?
Yeah, well, we're pushing for this policy to be adopted by government. It's the same policy as the Labour government, supported by the Labour Party, supported by the Greens and the New Zealand First Party, backed and going into the last election. They made an election promise to implement what's called a wood first policy, but we call it carbon zero construction because I think it doesn't need to be wood specific. It's just whatever's going to be delivering a carbon zero result in 2030 so that we can hit our 2050 deadlines. But it's going to drive massive amounts of carbon sequestration. Not only are the trees going to be obviously sequestering a lot more carbon, but also we're going to be replacing steel and concrete or cement imported from offshore, which is highly, highly polluting. If concrete was a country, if the world's concrete was a country, to be the third biggest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. That's how much it emits. So we've got to get serious about this climate change, and New Zealand's got a 10% slither where it can eliminate in the next 10 years if it moves rapidly to utilisation and maximisation of wood. So COVID's come along as well. There's obviously very significant job opportunities. A dollar spent on wood products from New Zealand employs for every person employed, and directly employs 2.7 more people. So there's about 400,000 New Zealanders, including their families, supported by that sector. Obviously, a dollar that gets spent on heavy steel or cement from Indonesia or Thailand or China very quickly goes offshore, and we don't get that recurring benefit to the country from it. So it's another great reason post-COVID to really get in behind that policy and make sure we push it through now.
Ross, the other thing too that we don't benefit from is selling our land into overseas owned forestry here in New Zealand for, of course, that offshore processing. What can we do about that?
I mean, we're reasonably comfortable. Our major suppliers are mainly owned by offshore owners of the forests, especially if they're large institutions with large forests that are harvesting throughout the rotation years, because they don't want to try to sort of pick the peaks because they can't sort of dry off their harvesting and planting and silviculture crews. So they are actually really, often the foreign owners, if they're not buying the forests and planting them to take back to their own countries, which is kind of like the China strategy. If they're doing it for pure investment, then they will look after the local producers here. That's been our experience. Not all processors will get that same support because, maybe they're not strategic, or maybe they're just not reinvesting, or that maybe the forester sees them as a credit risk. And I think you can't ask the foresters to take that risk if they perceive it as real.
Yeah, fantastic. No, it's very interesting to see it from across the board because, of course, capital is something that we lack in New Zealand as well, and the onshore processing has so many elements to it, and the flow-on effect for jobs as well. Marty, I'm in full support of your carbon zero construction policy, coming from a wool family. This is exactly what we need, and there's a lot of other carbon zero construction, such as hempcrete. That is only just emerging. So there's lots of exciting things. Now, talking about locking up carbon, there's a lot of locked up carbon behind you right now. That's a very interesting build.
Yeah, I'm actually coming to you from New Zealand's oldest building. This building was constructed originally in the 1780s in New York State by the pioneers that went in there, and few years ago, we moved 2 of these barns across to a lifestyle block north of Auckland and still live in them. So it's a good story about locking up, carbon dioxide for hundreds of years, because these trees would have started their life more than 300 years ago. So it just demonstrates what's possible with wood, because you can move it around. You don't have to sort of smash it apart. And that's kind of where it's going as well with the future of urban development and buildings, is being able to say, okay, how do I reuse this? How do I pull it apart? And that lends itself to wood as well, because it's easy to put the stuff together and it's easy to take that stuff apart and move it. As cities grow and something's not needed in that location, it can be moved, reused. This is a perfect example.
Yeah, fantastic. It's been lovely chatting to you, Marty. Marty is the Chief Executive for Red Stag Group. They're talking around the new domestic policies that are coming into place affecting the oversupply or over-reliance potentially of New Zealand wood exports into places such as China. I do have a few questions coming in I'll get to very shortly. Now, coming up on Sara's Country, we're going to talk about soy, hemp, chickpeas, oats, buckwheat and quinoa. All new opportunities for New Zealand farmers. That is with Susan Goodfellow up next from Leftfield Innovation. This is Sara's Country.
Balance has its own team of innovation specialists. It's our job to lead the way, working with some of the most cutting-edge science and research. We've got partnerships with some of the best suppliers in the world, so our farmers get the very best products for New Zealand farms.
And in every region across the country, the conditions are very different, and farmers and growers' needs are too.
That's why we're always looking for solutions that are just right, like here at our Huntly Service Centre.
And here in Canterbury, we've got a self-service silo, so I can pick up fat when it suits me.
And here in Morrinsville, we've got a world-class mill. That means that we can safely deliver our customers with the freshest, highest quality feed and minerals.
It's about putting the customer first, because that's what drives our business.
We've been focusing on faster turnaround of orders. We've got to get the right products to the right places at the right times.
Here in Taranaki, we've got New Zealand's only urea manufacturing plant. It's where we create our premium sustained fertiliser.
We're supplying nationwide and working locally. By getting to know you and what you want to achieve, we can help you get there.
And with the new My Balance platform, Balance has put my farm at my fingertips.
In fact, we offer support in all sorts of ways, sharing the best nutrition practice with farming families across the country. Whether we're talking about animal health, farm productivity,
or looking after our natural environment, sustainability underpins everything we do. We use our local expertise and the latest tools to help farmers and growers navigate the changing regulations, so you can leave your farm in great shape for the future.
And we can be really accurate, avoiding areas like wetlands and waterways with our award-winning Spread Smart tech. It makes the job far safer, more efficient and gives you the best results.
When you've got access to that kind of know-how, you've got the support you need to make sure you're farming sustainably. It's that kind of thinking that'll keep us going for generations to come.
Together creating the best soil and feed on earth.
Joel, your mother says it rained in Northern Ireland last night. Whoop, whoop, she said. They've actually had the driest May on record in Northern Ireland. This is according to Joanne Rock, one of Sara's Country's biggest fans. Of course, she's checking in on the boy. That's how she does it. Joel Kinnis, of course, I knew you were going to drop there. Dunstan Downs. Do you know where Dunstan Downs is? When you go through the Lindis Pass, I'll have to point it out, Joel. She's pretty cold there in Amarama. Challenge back in the 50s, 60s, no installation to speak of. Some pipes were lagged. Frozen pipes were the order of the day even. Rooms at the back of the house were very cold with kerosene heaters only. Coal range in the kitchen. Maybe late 60s, there was some insulation puffed into the ceiling, but with limited success. Just the way it was. Yes, absolutely, Jock. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had a friend who lived in a cottage at Criffle at Wanaka that was that old. They used to put hay bales up against the side of the house around all the pipes to make sure they didn't freeze in Wanaka. And that was 10 years ago. So tell us about your coldest houses that you've lived in and the improvements that you've made. I'm absolutely loving, as I said at the start of the show, friends managing a place in North Island. The farm owners are paying 90 grand to double glaze the entire house. I think it's excellent. The place I'm living in, all new wall carpet going into all the farm accommodation. We are valuing this and it's so exciting. Now, only a few years back, the heat really started to come on the farming of animals versus plants, and this wave of environmental terrorism without appreciating the New Zealand difference of our farming systems. New Zealand red meat and dairy farmers have become very outraged at the claims on their respect that they have about our environment and animal welfare, farming in a goldfish bowl under extreme pressure. But what has emerged has been opportunity. Like any good crisis, we shouldn't waste it. Farmers grow to the market. If they want red kiwi fruit, we'll grow it. If they want lactose-free cow's milk, we'll work out how to process it. If they want finer wool suits, we'll work that out too. That's just the Kiwi way. But it's how a free market works, and of course the demand for new pulses such as oat milk and quinoa is of course the new trend. How can you get involved in this in your business? Joining us now is Susan Goodfellow from Leftfield Innovation. Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks, Sarah. Hey, thanks for having me on.
Oh, I've been looking for the opportunity to bring you on. Myself and Susan have some very good, robust discussions about the industry off air over some cups of coffee at Robert Harris here in Lincoln. Now, so super excited to see this report come through. Our Land, Our Water Science Challenge is pumping out some very, very good content. Now, 6 rockstar crops have been identified and how farmers can use them to diversify their business into more a multi-land use situation. How did the entire report come about and your involvement as an organisation in that challenge?
Sure. Well, look, it's a little bit of a story. We met with some farmers in central Canterbury probably nearer 2 years ago, and we were looking at, diversifying land use opportunities, particularly in relation to the new water coming on through Central Plains. And a lot of the farmers were saying, well, can you look at things that we can grow that we know how to grow, something that's de-risked, we know how to do it. So we took that idea away and thought, well, look, let's take a look at some near-term opportunities for value, things we know we can grow, things we know we have food processing capability to turn from raw materials into high value, and things that we know the market potentially will want. So we did an initial near-term opportunities value study that identified a range of grains, pulses, vegetables and plant oils. And from that, the specialty grains and pulses opportunity was identified by our Land and Water National Science Challenge Next Generation team. And they contacted us to look at working with some Central Plains farmers and taking that forward and doing a deeper dive to really understand what this opportunity looked like.
What I love, we're operating and broadcasting here out of Blink Innovation on the Lincoln University campus, and the innovation of new ideas is incredible. And in this type of environment, Susan, it's not only just what else can we plant, but how can we build this into a biodiversity ecosystem of our farm, which can sort of uptake nitrogen and be a part of an overall ecosystem. Is that a lot of what this report is as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about, we tested the farmers and their appetite for the future farm system and what that looked like. Now, we've since undertaken that conversation with other farmers as well. And it's pretty clear the future looks like a diverse mixed farm system where the plants and animals work together to really enhance, the outcomes, ensure the soil quality is enhanced and preserved. So I think that farmers are seeing they're able to look at their land, look at their soil types and look at what's most suitable across that landscape for growing different things. And really the different things need to be market-led, which really brings us into the important conversation about making sure it's not what you can grow. There's lots of things we can grow, but making sure there's a market there, a secure market, and working back from that point.
Absolutely, because there's no point growing it if they don't want it. Now, some of these things are about, say, buckwheat or GE-free soybeans and chickpeas. How have some of these gone down with potential markets?
Well, that's a good question, and we undertook quite a reasonably detailed market insight study within New Zealand as a first step. The larger manufacturers and retail outlets were not so keen. It's very price driven, but you get down to the more gourmet, smaller format operators, and they're really, really keen on New Zealand grown, can't get their hands on any GE-free soy, and would love to see more of that available for their customers. So I think there is a real opportunity. We need to dig deeper and really start to look at what we transform that raw material into in terms of the high value food products that the consumers want, the format and function of those food products. We did get quite a bit of feedback. It's definitely, they want low processed. They don't want highly processed food, really great snack options for adults and kids, and the ready to use meal options as well. So we've got some really cool leads around opportunities, and we're now able to we are working with some food companies to develop those ideas.
And you've got a farm grower group. How are the farmers been in supporting these new concepts? They're embracing them?
Yeah, look, it's a Future Grains Grower Group, and it's spread across Canterbury and mid-Canterbury. And look, they're really excited to see what's coming through, particularly around some of the plant varieties that we've brought in from overseas and we're trialling here to create some of those innovative food products. So they can't wait to get their hands on some of that seed and really get underway and grow. And I think the key thing with the farmers is they realise that how they grow the product, how they grow the crop, is critically important, because it's about providing that authentic, data-driven traceability, transparency story to the consumer. And that sort of led into the work around creating an app to ensure the consumer has that ability to see where the food's come from, how it's been grown, the nutritional content, and all sorts of other things like that. So the farmers are super excited to be involved.
Now, Susan, before you go, I know that you're extremely passionate about this particular topic, but do you think that this government over the past 3 years has actually started to appreciate that increased water storage and the improvement of irrigation doesn't necessarily mean an intensification and expansion of dairy?
I think it's starting to become appreciated, and I'm currently working with my team for the Wakamoka Community Water Storage Scheme proposed for the Wairarapa, and the work we're doing with the team up there is all about sustainable land use and what opportunities are there under new reliable water. And so I think there's some really clear work being done to demonstrate that, and so that story is becoming available and the actions are there to prove it. So I think people are becoming more aware, and it's difficult to avoid really being able to address water storage for community use, including industry, drinking water, agriculture, food and fibre production, and environmental flows. When we're looking at what's happening in central North Island around the drought, we must do something about this, but we must do it in the right way for all of the stakeholders.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. This is Susan Goodfellow from Leftfield Innovation, and that's of course the Our Land, Our Water report out today around these specialty pulses and grains and how we can harness that value opportunity for our consumers, searching for that New Zealand difference that we do so well. Now, talking about water, a place in New Zealand that doesn't have an issue with sourcing it is Southland. Southland is going to we're going to Southland to uncover the collaborative work that's been going on since that dreadful anti-winter grazing campaign that happened last year. And of course, farmers want to be compliant but need to be understood as well in terms of this post-COVID processing backlog. All that with Federated Farmers Southland Vice President Bernadette Hunt. This is Sara's Country.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey. Do you reckon it'll come out? Cover it and tell compound to leave it 10 minutes. You'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You call a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce high quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
Now, sadly, we all know that it takes one photo of stock in a muddy paddock to absolutely destroy the perception of our industry. But seldom does that one photo tell the full story in terms of what the farmer has in place to protect their waterways from runoff and ensure good animal welfare. Now, as the temperature gauge starts to drop, federated farmers and the allied groups that are around them have created an action plan to head off these issues with winter grazing this year going into the winter. Now, joining us now to discuss this is Bernadette Hunt, the Southland Federated Farmers Vice President. Good evening. How are you?
Hi, Sarah. I'm good, thank you.
How's the weather been in Southland since we're talking about weather?
Actually, yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. We've been blessed with a beautiful autumn, which we desperately needed actually after the spring and summer that we had.
Oh, absolutely. Now, could you just outline for people that are new to the situation around why this particular winter will be different to most for Southland farmers?
Yeah, so this season has thrown some huge challenges at Southland with a really difficult and wet spring that delayed the planting of lots of crops, and that was followed by a record-breaking flood in February, which decimated some of the crops that had got into the ground and took away some baleage and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, the crop or the amount of feed available in the province to get through winter was already stretched, I guess, before we head into winter. So, and then COVID-19 came along and put lots of constraints on meat processing plants who had to protect their employees, understandably, and recognise social distancing requirements. So that meant that processing was massively reduced. So lots of farmers have entered winter with extra stock, or gone through autumn and entered winter with lots of extra stock on their farm that they hadn't planned for, on top of the winter feed shortages.
Now, that situation last winter was a very stressful time for a lot of Southland farmers, where their farming management practices came under huge scrutiny without just that good old Kiwi Southland way of having a yarn about it over the fence. But this year, there's been some intervention groups established. Could you tell us about how we're going to handle this differently this winter?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, last year was horrible, and it got to the point where every farmer was going to bed at night thinking, jeepers, is it going to be a photo of my place on the front page of the paper tomorrow morning? Because the reality is you can get a bad photo anywhere you want to if you want to badly enough. Now, granted, there are some farmers who needed to lift their game with winter grazing practices, and none of us deny that, but the vast majority of farmers really set out to do a good job, and are devastated to think that it might be perceived differently. So what we've done this year is created a process that we hope will give people that have got concerns about anything they see with winter grazing an appropriate and constructive avenue to report those concerns, and industry will follow those up with the farmers involved and have a look at what's going on, and where it's needed, offer some advice and help that farmer to get the right things in place to make sure that we don't have a repeat of some of the scenes that we saw last year.
How close are you working with SPCA? The reason I say this is I actually talked to a young girl who worked for SPCA, and she said to me, thankfully I've actually grew up as a farmer's daughter that I can explain when the phone calls come in, but she said over winter, majority of them are people concerned about winter grazing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in all honesty, I've had no contact with the SPCA at all. We deal with MPI regarding animal welfare, so that's kind of our go-to agency. So MPI have been involved. What happened as a result of last year is a national strategic winter grazing management group's been set up. It's headed by Federated Farmers Katie Milne, and there's a wide range of organisations on that group, including regional councils, MPI, Beef and Lamb, Dairy NZ, many others, all seeking to take a big picture view, I guess, of winter grazing, look at what we can address for this season, like this process, what we can do over the next few seasons, and what we need to look at long term. So yeah, that's where this has come from.
Yeah, it seems like there is very much a two-pronged approach. I mean, the industry groups, obviously we talk a lot internally to ourselves within this industry, and for upping our game when it comes to winter grazing management is certainly necessary, but at the same time there's our outward focusing strategy to avoid negative publicity, and working in with some of these groups to be able to have those conversations. I mean, it's one thing for compliance, and there's other thing for perception.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one of the pieces of feedback, I guess, that we've taken on board is that if people don't feel they've got a constructive outlet to report their concerns, they take those concerns to social media or other less constructive outlets. And so we've given them a constructive way to report their concerns, and it's an industry-led approach. Industry and farmers supporting other farmers to get this right and to do a better job. And very often when we see problems going on a farm, there is actually a lot more going on behind the scenes, and often those farmers are the ones that actually most need some support. So another farmer going in and offering that support is far better than a sledging on social media. So I really encourage anybody, don't have to be a farmer, anyone at all who sees something that they're concerned about, get onto our 0800 number, that's 0800 farming, and report it. Or you can go to the Federated Farmers website, and there's, if you search winter grazing on the homepage of our website, you can get a form to fill out that will achieve the same purpose, and those cases will all be looked at by a group in the region that it's relevant to, and they will all be followed up.
How has been your approach and reception from Environment Southland? Positive?
Very positive. Yep, Environment Southland have been involved in the development of this process and are supportive of it. And particularly the regional councils have been supportive of the idea that industry takes the first kind of step and makes contact with the farmer without the need for involvement of regional council or MPI. If we have a concern that that farmer isn't going to address the concerns that have been raised or isn't willing to do a better job, then we'll pass those things on. You know, we don't want the imagery that we saw last year. One of those shots, you know, puts all farmers in a bad light. So if a farmer isn't willing to engage with our support and help improve what they're doing, then we will pass the calls on, but we don't actually expect that. Most farmers really want to do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And get those rat bags tidied up, because like you said, it's just one photo of a farmer who, you know, is doing the wrong thing, and can I just say, can't be asked. I've seen it everywhere. They've got the hay bale feeder and everything all around the gate, but that is very slim, and it's not a representative of everyone, but as you said, it's just that one photo. Bernadette, you're a very well versed in essential freshwater policy from Southland Federated Farmers, and there's a lot of catchments down in your area that have done some incredible work, such as Pomahaka as an example. How do you feel about what you saw released last week? So what are some of those wins and losses from your perspective?
Yeah, I have very mixed feelings about it. It was great to see some of the things that were in there that were just not sensible. Some of them have been fixed in response to the feedback that was received. So that was great to see. It was worth farmers taking all the time they did to make submissions, and a lot of that stuff has been heard. There are definitely still some things in there that are really, really concerning. And I have a general concern about blanket rules. You know, there's no way that people in government buildings in Wellington know better than the farmers on the ground doing it here. Yes, I accept that we all have a responsibility to make sure that water quality is improved, and most farmers are working really hard to do that anyway. And there are still some remaining things in the new version of the policy that could have some really bad unintended consequences and are not going to help water quality. So you know, we're yet to see the detail. The actual regulation's not written yet, so I'm hoping that some of this can be refined further. But yeah, it's not all roses, that's for sure.
That is the thing you just said. It's not all set in concrete yet, but it seems to have had its second reading in Parliament and seems to be progressing quite fast through. I understand there was a total of 22 reports to inform final decisions. There's a lot of organisations that were shut out of that, in particular Federated Farmers. Are you concerned that we still haven't got everything on the table for what is a policy that will be with us for generations?
Yeah, very concerned. So, the devil's always in the detail with this kind of stuff. And, it's all very well producing nice documents that say what, people in government think the rules should look like, but the actual rules are what get followed, and we're yet to see those. So, there's a lot to play out here yet, although, the actual consultation process is closed.
Can I just say on behalf of everyone listening and watching, thank you so much for the tireless work that you do, Bernadette. I know it from observation from the outside. Southland is a very complex region with its own challenges, very unique to the rest of New Zealand, and certainly, punching from the bottom of New Zealand, making sure that your farmers' voices are heard is much, much appreciated. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Sarah. That means heaps.
No worries at all. That is Sara's Country. Open hearts and open minds. That is what we're here for, to talk about the matters that matter most, and produced in alliance with the wonderful, gorgeous team at Global HQ, of course, who are behind Farmers Weekly and the Dairy Farmer, and of course those wonderful team at Agri HQ for all your insight reports. Sadly, that's all we've got time for tonight, and thank you for running over time, but there is no really running over time with this new technology. We could yarn for hours if you'd like to stay watching. But of course, if you've missed anything, we did have a bit of a technical glitch there. It will be all stitched together beautifully by the wonderful Megan in the UK and available on podcast on demand, as it always is, first thing in the morning, for your pleasure, listening on demand in your truck as you get there. As that fog is rising and that frost is trying to heat up and burn off. Now, that is all we've got time for Sara's Country. Please send me, I do actually daily get emails telling me your suggestions for guests, dropping into my LinkedIn, my Instagram, Facebook, or send me an email, sarah@periummedia.com. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Good night and go well.
This is Sara's Country.